Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to this episode. I'm by myself today. Don't have Shannon here, but I have not been able to sleep all the way through the night for the past several weeks because I just have these models going through my mind that I want to share. And so hopefully this episode I just have some to lay out there. I want to digest them later with Shannon, but I want to talk about the Ikigai. I want to talk about how the levels of consciousness distort your perception. I want to talk about uh, masculinity and femininity and a really cool chart that I made. And I want to talk about the divide that we're having politically and in our world. And everyone always talks about they're doing this, they are doing that. And I want to put some light on who the they are, what it is. And by the end of this, if it's coherent enough, these frameworks will help you look at the world, look at politics, look at religion, look at anything going on in your life through a lens that will help you recognize if something's coming from a fearful place or a loving place, or something's coming from a distorted place of masculinity or femininity, if it's on too far yin or too far yang, and what that means. I think you'll really like the framework. But to start out, the Ikigai I was doing, I thought that was really cool. Iki meaning life, and Gai meaning value or worth. So for many of you that want to know your life purpose, there's a really cool chart. So I thought this chart was pretty cool because you can go through and put what you love, what you are good at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. Once you find those four things, you can look at the overlap between what you love and what you're good at and find your passion. You can look at the overlap of what you're good at with what you can get paid for and find your profession, what you can be paid for and what the world needs and find your vocation, and what the world needs with what you love for your mission. Then, once you have your passion, mission, profession, and vocation, those all overlap to bring you into your purpose, what it really is. And we all know it deep down. It's a pretty cool exercise. I'd be interested to see what you say. I actually made a little tool for this using a it's probably better to just do it on your own. But if you're having trouble getting from after the first four, if you kind of get stuck, I'll put a little link in the bio. I made a little AI agent to help analyze the words that are in what you love and what it needs, and help you figure out what the overlap is. It's a Anyway, pretty cool. I'll paste that in the chat. But the purpose of mine that I found was I took it twice in with the agent because I was having a hard time finding the words. And one time it gave me sovereignty, the other time it gave me liberation. So liberation from what is the main thing I want to get to at the end of this episode. I just want to lay out some frameworks that will put some light on what it is exactly that we are wanting to liberate from, what it is that is. And I have to be careful with the words I use because the last episode I did, I feel like it might have been suppressed by the algorithm for maybe some of the words I said. So I don't know if I want to talk about it in the exact same way, but let me just show you what I'm talking about. But before I do, I want to talk about axioms. Axioms are really, really important. An axiom is a foundational principle that, off of that principle, you can extrapolate things downstream. So one thing that is a common pattern of all religions is that a prophet gets inspired, or some spiritual someone that is operating at a much higher level of consciousness than the prevailing level, and that's power. They bring this truth and they can do things and perform the miraculous, and they at least at a minimum start speaking a high level of truth. And in short order, a few disciples follow that person. And then after a few, this is, by the way, this was explained by Sean O'Leary. I'll put a clip to this as well in the notes. After the people start following them, they establish or they get some attention, and the people that don't like the truth sayer usually end up silencing or killing the prophet. Once the prophet's killed, they create sort of a community around the teachings. That the martyrdom actually catalyzes this like attention and growth. And after a little bit, the community grows to a large amount and then needs to be sort of managed. So hierarchies come in, and then religious dogma comes in, and uh, you got to do the ritual this way, you got to do this that way. And eventually, that dogma starts to stray from the actual thing that was being said by the prophet, but then people are getting caught up in the literalness, or the procedure and things like that. And eventually, now that it's an organization, it starts treating people as a number. And there's a study called the Dunn study that once you get above 150 people, and we think it might even be lower, you stop knowing people by their name in an organization. Hierarchies develop, and then when you something that you wouldn't typically do to a friend, like if I'm on a first name basis with somebody, and I'm unlikely to do something unethical or that isn't correct to them. But if I don't know them and it's just a number, I'm way more apt to slip into that temptation, which is what we're going to arrive to, the common issue that everyone's facing that's causing this divide. But anyway, that religion that became dogmatic eventually becomes starts being critical of anyone inside of their congregation that starts looking for truth elsewhere. And then they generally start a campaign to take over other religions or other controls. It could be through preaching the gospel. It could preaching the gospel, or it could be through literal inquisition. Like, well, they have internal inquisition to, hey, if you're looking at this or you're believing this, we're going to kick you out. And some of them, if you don't join us, we're going to kill you. Or if you don't join us, we're gonna at least kick you out of where you live. So that pattern has literally happened. I even made a chart here. I'm not gonna go through it extensively, and you're gonna think I'm the biggest nerd ever. But I basically went through and found all the spiritual reformers from basically as far back as I could find, and Krishna, Zoroaster. And by the way, this one was pretty cool because this reminded me of Jesus's time, where the people at the time were caught up in rituals. They were caught up in the dogma, and this prophet had a vision that the people in that religion had of the religion at the time had strayed away from the true God and were caught up in rituals, much like the Pharisees criticizing Jesus for, say, healing on the Sabbath. And he had a vision that was strayed away, and that it's time to come back to center and establish Zoroastrianism. And I believe there's like 2 million members of this religion left today. It's one of the oldest religions. Anyway, I went through all of these spiritual reformers, and every single one is bringing religion back from the distortion when they get into the dogma and they get into the rituals and they just get lost. These people have this insight and they try to bring everyone back, and it works temporarily for a time, but after, again, they start speaking the truth, they get popular, they get killed, they get following a community, then they get the hierarchies and dogma, and eventually end up creating this really divisive, we have this, and if not, you're out of here. Every single reformer pretty much that I found followed that same pattern. So I don't want to go into all of them. I just want to show you some of these names. When an organization gets large, it decides it's going to treat somebody as a number, and it's no longer treating somebody as a human. And I wanted to, and I've talked about this before, but I want to show you this temptation and what it is. Okay, there's a scripture that talks about this temptation, and I want to lay this out. It is Matthew 4:8, and it talks about, again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, and said unto him, all these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Then Jesus said to him, begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. This temptation to have power and control over other people, from what I've read, is the final temptation at the gateway of enlightenment. Many spiritual people that have elevated to a certain level of consciousness start to tap into this power, and instead of leaving it, attributing it to the divine, they start attributing it to the self. And even at a very high level, one can fall into this temptation. David Hawkins talked about, when in his experience, how he saw many gurus had come and many had fallen. When you look at the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, same thing happened to him. He was tempted by, I believe it was Mara, the represent representative evil, and he was also tempted with power and control. So this, in a fancy word, is called megalomania. Megalomania is that incessant thirst for power and control. So that lives in all of us in a deep shadow. The ego, aside from wanting to survive, the main thing it really wants is power and control over other people. So the battle that we're having is that we are fighting an enemy that is exists in every person to varying degrees, and it actually gets worse in organizations. So when you get an organization above, like I said, 150 people, and you become a number and it becomes higher in a hierarchy, you it is so much easier to fall into that temptation, because, oh, this will make more money for my family if I hose this business partner, or, oh, I can do this, and you'll justify it because you want more power, you want more control. And until the world realizes that it's subject to this sort of master, change won't happen. So kind of like, slavery went on for a while. I mean, forever. It's always been going on, still going on. But in the States, when there was a lot of people that realized their level of consciousness had started rising to the point where they realized, hey, man, this isn't ethical. This is not right. And until once enough people finally knew, then you saw the Civil War and change happen. I'm really prayerful that that kind of change happens, but in a much less violent way for us. But we'll see, I guess, what happens. Okay, so that's megalomania. That's the thirst for power and control over other people. That exists. I just explained it in a religion. Now, just think about a business. Think about a healthcare company. Think about an insurance company. How many times have you heard the saying, "Business is just business," and it's this scapegoat to be able to treat someone unethically in the name of business, which is so stupid to me. And what are all the exploitative practices that businesses do? So we have a government that we elect, we gave power, we sovereign citizens lent power to an institution to try to stop us from being abused by institutions. What we didn't, I know that our founding fathers realized, but what's happened since from the founding of our company, which had these axioms of individual liberty, freedom, the right to the right to pursue happiness. Over time, little rules, little deviations have continued to metastasize the size, scope, and of government to the point where it's falling into the same, it has fallen deeply into the same trap of power and control over other people. So, like, here's an example that's not spiritual, and I'll rabbit hole on this one of these episodes. The natural state of the market is deflation. That means, for any of you that didn't take economics or just think about it, the natural state of the market is deflation. Okay. That means, like, when I produce a good and people like it, other people are going to see that good and be like, I can make that. And all of a sudden we're competing to sell the same good to the same people. So we have to make it better. We have to make it less expensive. And through the free market, through competition, prices or you get a better product for less cost. Add the fact that technology increases our productivity. So when you come out with really technology, it helps you make your item much faster and less expensive. That again makes you be able to provide a better product for less money. That is deflationary. That means the price should be going down of your goods. You can see this with flat screen TVs. They used to be a freaking fortune, and now you can buy for like $300 a TV that was like $3,000. I don't know, 15 years ago or whatever it was. So so that's an example of an axiom. And I don't want to unwind it totally on this episode, but if you unwind that and you ask yourself, why do we have inflation? You're eventually going to lead yourself down this rabbit hole where you realize, holy shit, we are being taken advantage of. Somebody is printing our money. Our poor people, our people that have no assets, they don't have any assets that inflate with the inflation, so their home doesn't go up in value, their stocks don't go up because they don't have any. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and if they can't make enough money to eat, then they go on welfare and they become even more subject to this control system, this government control system, and life just gets worse disproportionately to the lower class. But the fact that we don't all as a citizenry experience the benefits of the advances in technology and production, that it's getting siphoned off somewhere, is completely criminal. When our society realizes that, there's going to be such an upheaval. This is an economic thing. I'm telling you right now. And the only solution I found so far, and it's a great solution, and it's going to take you 100 hours of YouTube to do it, but if you really rabbit hole on Bitcoin, you're going to realize that is a sovereign currency. It is sovereign from government. It's sovereign from institutional abuse. That's the whole goal of it. It's decentralized. And so that is a principle of the first thing I want to talk about is how do we combat this megalomania that's prevalent in our institutions? Well, for starters, we can decentralize, keep organizations small. Don't allow for giant institutions because it always ends up in abuse. Have these nodes. If you have a spiritual community, instead of trying to be a monolith of some big giant org, establish your little spiritual community in your area with your friends and family, and challenge and support each other. Challenge and support each other for the highest level of truth. That's way more effective than trying to be herded by some institution who's always going to fall into that trap. Okay, so here's the other thing about the political divide I want to point out. So there's two models that help you frame the world in a way that if you look at the world these two ways, you'll never see it differently again. So I want to lay out the axiom. So I just gave you an axiom about the free market and finance, unrelated. Now we give you a spiritual axiom. This is one of the most important. It probably is the most important. I like my two favorite axioms are: there are no accidents, which I don't want to go into right now, and everybody does what they perceive to be the best at the time. Shorter said by Jesus, forgive them, they know not what they do. So I want to explain why that is. Okay, we've talked about this before. This is David Hawkins' greatest teacher outside of Jesus that I have found. Most incredible, comprehensive work, especially for the male brain because of his psychology and medical background. He's just so eloquent and so articulate with his words that he explains that everything in the world is energy. Everything has a vibration. Everything has an essence to it. You can't measure divinity. So I know some of you listeners are like, "Oh, what do you put in there's a scale of spirituality?" I get the knee jerk reaction. And look, this is an arbitrary scale. If you really look into his work, take the time. I can't explain the whole thing right now. I just tell you that he found a way to calibrate spiritual energy by the kinesiologic response in the human body. And that's to say that when you hear something that's truthful, or you eat something that's healthy, or you're around positivity, there's a kinesiologic response for strength in the body. When you are operating from a restriction in the body, or you're around negative people, or they even did these tests where you have rat poison in one hand, vitamin C in the other, and the arm that held the vitamin, and these were in paper bags, so they didn't know what it was. The arm holding the vitamin C would be stronger than the arm holding the rat poison. So kinesiology is this really well-known scientific study, but David Hawkins found a way to do muscle testing to calibrate the range of consciousness, or the range of energy that we experience in this dimension, in this earthly plane. And so it's an arbitrary scale, 0 to 1,000, 1 being bacteria, 1,000 being Christ consciousness. And we are all fractals of divinity, and we are all expressing ourselves at various vibrations. So if what I want to show you what that means. So on this scale, if you look, everything up to 200 is in the ego. It's part of the animal brain. It's going to create restriction in the body. It's going to generate suffering in the world. You're generating fearful thoughts, fearful energy. That's what you're projecting out there, and that's what the world gives you back. Once you reach 200, that's the tipping point of spirituality. That's when you start doing something that's counter your animal nature. That's where you decide not to do the wrong thing. And from that point on, you can evolve all the way up through this ecstatic bliss and love. And you hear a lot of these teachers, like the Buddha. In fact, the Buddha got to a point where he felt like every bone in his body was breaking because his vibration was so high, and it went from actually being this blissful, exquisite joy to being this bone breaking, awful feeling because it was ecstatic. So we are on the journey of evolving from animal nature into spiritual nature. The whole world is doing that right now. Every person is expressing themselves at different vibrations. So if you want to have compassion for everyone, you have to consider that they are you. We're fractals of the same source, but they're merely perceiving their world differently than you, whether it's higher or lower. And let me show you a chart for this. So if you look at this chart, way down here on shame, which is the lowest vibration, the emotional state is humiliation. Your view of life is miserable. Your view of God is despising. And the process is elimination. So this cool chart that he put together basically gives you an idea. Look at anger. So at anger, I'm much higher. My emotional state is hate. My view of life is antagonistic. My view of God is that he's vengeful, and my process, or my way of being is a aggression. And when you get these higher states, like willingness, your emotional state becomes more optimistic. Your view of life is hopeful. Your view of God is inspiring, and your state of being is intention. So this is what Christ meant when he said, "Forgive them; they know not what they do." When you are operating, and the people at the time of Christ operated, I want to say it was like 70 on the scale. It was like maybe 100. So that it was a really, as a collective, like it was a really low vibration. And these soldiers that are ordered to kill Jesus, they know that if they don't follow their orders, they're going to be killed. And they can't weigh life like somebody that's more spiritually aware, because they can't perceive it. They don't even realize, taking a regular person's life, what the spiritual nature of that decision is. Because kind of like, think about like a shark. It goes and it kills, and it doesn't feel bad about it. That's sort of what a serial killer is. It's just a low level of consciousness. And everybody in your life, that no matter what they're doing, I don't care what it is, what they've done to you, how could they do that to me? How could they do this? I'm telling you right now that from where they're standing, it makes sense to them. They feel that they are doing what is best, even if they know it's wrong. If they think they've been taught, like at church or something, hey, you shouldn't rob that bank. Well, at the time, maybe in a point of desperation, feeling like they need to provide for their family or whatever it is, or the short term payoff, the thrill of doing whatever it is, it makes sense to them at the time. It's only post making that decision that the emotions of shame and guilt come in, and that actually only happens if you're at a high enough state of consciousness to feel those things. Fortunately, in the U.S. we have a very high, relatively high state of consciousness where there's at least this moral compass that when someone does something wrong, a lot of times they can experience the byproduct of it, and eventually, if someone my experience has been that people continue to make poor decisions and suffer more and more and more until there's a rock bottom. At the rock bottoming event, then they, orient upward and start to change the way they operate in the world because they actually realize, hey, if I operate like this, it's yielding a lot of suffering. So it's actually a selfish endeavor in the sense which spiritual endeavor is. It's we want to suffer less. So that axiom, everyone does what they perceive to be best at the time. That's what Jesus meant. That is the key to forgiveness. If you can really grok this concept, you can forgive everyone. It doesn't excuse what they've done. You don't decide, oh well, they must have decided it was good to punch me in the face. You know what? It doesn't make it right. And sometimes the loving thing to do back isn't what you think it is. It's not pacifism. If something is some lower way of being is infringing on your space, if it's breaking the integrity of your environment, the loving thing to do is to change it. Sometimes that's a punch in the face. Sometimes that's calling the cops, whatever. Or sometimes that's not being friends with that person anymore. You still love them, but you recognize, hey, I don't want that. That's not life-giving to me. That's not something I want to be in altering my life. Okay, so that's the one. I've talked about this scale before. I hope you like that one. Now here's the new one that no. Okay, the Hermetic principle of gender states that gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. You can read the book The Kabbalion about this. It's super cool. Here's the symbol of the Vesica Pisces, which means the fish bladder. You can kind of see there's a fish head right here and then the tail, kind of like you'd see on the back of a car. This is one of the coolest symbols. And once I saw it, I've been thinking a lot about masculinity and femininity, and someone brought this up. This explains the polarity between masculine and feminine. So on the left, it doesn't matter which side you pick, but we'll say the left is yin, that's this feminine energy, and on the right, let's call it yang, this is the masculine energy. And where they intersect is where creation happens. So you have chaos on one side, order on the other side, and in order to become manifest, they have to work together. And this, in my take, and I don't know this for sure, I want to talk with Shannon about how she feels about this, but to me, it seems that the first split of divinity to me seems like this split into these poles where it has the it it gives you the opportunity to actually create a separation from divinity or create a split from oneness, because in wholeness all things are possible. Everything just created instantly, right? So this kind of polarity, allowing for one to deviate off into being too far masculine or too far feminine, can actually create this separated or fallen state that we experience right now. So I made a cool chart. Again, this is maybe out there, but let me know what you guys think. Okay, so here's the yin column I made. So think of that, those two circles. artistic, receptive, mercy focused, soft, right brain, diffuse, intuitive, emotional, compassionate, loving, humble, dark, which is interesting. The yin is the reason why the feminine is in the yin yang is dark. It's not evil. It's actually the unlimited potential of the feminine that creates. So like think about a mother's womb. Inside of the womb, it's dark in there. That's why the yin is dark. Nurturing, tender love, patient, considerate, cooperative, community oriented, open minded. These are all feminine qualities and they're amazing. And without these, you cannot create. This is where ideas come from. This is where potential is. And it's highly valuable. On the right side, you have yang, technical, active, justice focused, hard brain, left brain, directed, narrow focus, rational, logical, confident, powerful, courageous, independent, light, protective, tough love, task oriented, assertive, competitive, individuated, skepticism. This is order. This is the ability to provide a scaffolding for the feminine. The scaffolding for the feminine allows them to meet in the middle and create. If you get too much yin or too much yin, you can't build. It's just too much chaos. It's entropy. You get too much yang, it becomes restrictive. And this is, I don't like using the word toxic masculinity or toxic femininity, because it's like when you say toxic love, and like, love isn't toxic. So putting an adjective on it's something else different than love. So I just call it on the feminine, because the feminine's typically not, think about even like our physiologically, the male and the female does not have a physical advantage. The male does. And the male is sort of built to build stuff. This is a scaffolding builder. And physically the feminine's built to be kind and softer and not really designed the same way. Now, when a feminine or a masculine want power and control, which again is the enemy, this is why I want to give you this framework. When the temptation to have power and control other people's manifest to the masculine or the feminine, it resorts to a tactic called manipulation. This is where all of those qualities I just read off to you distort. They distort into impractical, passive, enabling, indecisive, irrational, unfocused, missed details, impulsive, unstable, insecure, dependent, possessive, pitying, depressive, smothering, indulgent, complacent, neglect of self, submissive, suppressed needs, gullible. These are all the distortions of the feminine that actually create manipulation and suffering in the world. This is gossiping about your friends. This is these wild chess games that very injured feminine do to try to get what they want, and it's awful. And over on the yang side, it's the same thing. It's awful, but the way it plays out, at least to the male brain, is a little more obvious. It's all the yin qualities that were nice, the scaffolding, the order, the providing structure, providing, protecting, all that stuff, that distorts into power and control, rigid. So all those qualities distort into rigid. I call it restriction as a category: rigid, restless, punitive, harsh, reductionist, tunnel vision, myopic, cold, detached, arrogant, isolated, tyrannical, reckless, blinding, overbearing, unloving, obsessive, aggressive, cutthroat, narcissistic, cynical. This is our bureaucrat. This is where there's so much red tape at a company that you can't create what you want to create. Here comes this feminine energy of, hey, we could create this amazing thing, and then once it starts getting into the machine, which is metastasized, which is generally the environment of our business environment, these institutions, they actually become so big that, and they become so far into this side of the scale that they actually start to fail. They become too big not to fail. that old saying of like too big to fail is stupid. Like it is the nature of an organization to fail because once it's gotten large enough and it's metastasized into this restrictive way of being, it cannot innovate, it cannot create new, and eventually it gets bogged down and it becomes redundant and obsolete. So from even like a business, even if, like I said, this is a framework that if you're running a business, is your business distorted from one side to the other? Is there too much yang, too much yin? Because as you grow, the best chance you have at maintaining this balance is not distorting into the outer edges. And so I actually made this pretty cool Vesica Pisces merge with the consciousness chart. I'll see if you think it's cool. Um, Okay, so this is the same Vesica Pisces, but I put creation in the middle. I put the higher states of consciousness in the middle to represent. And as you stray from center, as you stray from being whole and working together, you get into the lower vibrations and eventually these red areas, which are me trying to represent megalomania. This is power and control. This is where on the yin side, you got the yin is think about Democrats and Republicans or liberals and conservatives. Liberals are iconically about I want to serve people. I want to take care of people and every policy and everything is geared towards people and the Republicans are like, no, we got to take care of the goose. Like we got to take care of this ourselves. Like we can't be responsible for everyone else's decision. Now they both have merits to them, and the truth is in the middle. But when you get into your polarity, into your positions, you start fighting with each other, and you're like, "Are you the yin, the feminine's like you're such an insensitive, prick to the yang, and the yang's like you're delusional, you're not logical." And what does that sound like to you, husband and wife? How many times have you been in an argument with your spouse, whatever side you're on, and you're like, you're being irrational or you're being heartless? Well, what you're doing is you are expressing yourself in that polarity where you don't have the balance needed to actually create purely. This is the dilemma that we have, and this is why I tell you this framework. If you get what I'm saying, you can start to cradle all of your life experience through this structure or this measurement and be more vigilant of man, maybe I'm really, and by the way, men obviously by default we're masculine, we're too logical and not compassionate enough, and we don't have as much empathy by default. So that's something that has to be developed. Feminine, you have all those empathetic caretaking things by default. That's where you're going to lean. That's where you're going to want to operate. But you know what? You also need to be practical. You can't just be, oh, we should do this. We should do this. You've got to be practical so that we, the masculine and the feminine, can create together. When you see a political movement, for example, which again, think of institutions, they're all succumbing to megalomania. The healthcare, education system, media, our own government, every institution in your life is doing something to control you that I know of. I haven't seen an institution yet that hasn't at to some level strayed, but there's some that have gotten really crazy. Now, if you look in like our political environment, if somebody, like, let me give you the right one first. So if a conservative thing that's really popular is the saying facts don't care about your feelings. Well, that's a distorted view because that really just says your feelings don't matter. All that matters is logic. It's saying that logic is the highest form of truth. Logic is God. And that's my issue I take with a lot of conservative thought leaders, and they think that, oh, okay, well, if that's you're not logical, and this was Charlie Kirk. which that this part of this whole thing happened right in my back, 20 minutes away from me, the Charlie Kirk assassination. And the reason why he was polarizing to the left in part was because he was polarized in the masculine. I'm not saying, I actually don't believe he was polarized in the extreme. I actually think he was like center, my take, conservative, but he was so callous to the feelings and I want to tell you why I want to give Charlie an out, because what I feel like Charlie, part of why he had an aversion to even ingratiate some of the claims of being compassionate is because what has happened on the left the past, I don't know, 10 years or so. I feel like this is where we're at as a society. You can measure this for yourself. Again, I'm not even I'm a sovereign person. I don't believe in, I believe in a very limited government. I'm close to a liberty for what it's worth. I'm not saying this to be partisan. I really genuinely feel like where we're distorted most right now is not on the right. Society has swung so far left that a good chunk of the population is operating on this outer ring here. It's grabbing onto something that's virtuous, which is helping people, which is serving people, and doing something like, hey, we're going to shut down the government because you won't give welfare to all these immigrants. Hey, Black Lives Matter, or transgender, whatever. This isn't about Black people, transgender people, the immigrants. That's not what this political movement on the extreme left is about. What it's about is, how can I have power and control over other people, the other side specifically, but in general, it's just how can I have more power and control? Because if I can fly this virtuous banner and hide my true nature underneath it, then I can get away with, I can climb more power. I can leech off of this thing of virtue. Of course it's virtuous to take care of immigrants. Of course it's virtuous. Of course Black Lives Matter. Of course, all these things. So I do feel like Charlie, on some level, he probably had a aversion to even acknowledge the feelings dimension, the feminine dimension, because of how far we've strayed as a society. But that is an example of how this polarity of gender, it starts to divide, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with being feminine. There's nothing wrong with being masculine. And it's for you can say, it's part of our evolution. We actually, aside from the previous chart I showed you, which is that we are all evolving through from fear to love. That's an evolution. On top of that, what's a new material that I want you to digest, and I want to talk to Shannon about this, is that we are also evolving through the masculine and feminine. We're learning how to meet in the center so that creation can actually take hold. So that's the chart I wanted to show you. Wanted you to think about how megalomania is maybe presenting itself in your life. Maybe I'll do an episode on Bitcoin, and like the fact that our financial institution is built around theft. It's built around a bank printing, infinite money and just diluting your money supply. Maybe I'll do an episode specifically on more on this gender stuff. Maybe health. We could talk about health. We could talk about businesses. We can talk about religion. Doesn't really matter. But the theme, if you look at axioms, if you can bring yourself down to the foundation, this is why axioms are important. If you can find the axioms, it'll help you digest downstream. If not, you'll get really caught up. So try to look at the world through these lens. And I hope what I showed you today provides the key to compassion and forgiveness and understanding, so that when you have a difference in political opinion, you don't just call the other side stupid or insensitive. When you're talking with your spouse, that you don't just call them insensitive or irrational. And if you're having conflict with anybody or at work, think about these two models. Think about, man, is that person angry? Man, is that person shame? Does that person feel shame? Maybe it's even from a religion that. Then this is again the we can talk about that someday. How shame is actually like the worst. It is not. It's a control mechanism used by many religions. They want to guilt and shame you into subscribing to or being adherent to the monolith, and it's not what shame and guilt were designed for. But anyway, we can talk about all these topics. I just wanted to throw out the frameworks a little bit so you guys can look at them, digest them, comment, tell me what you think. Happy to share these with you. If you like it and you want to talk more about a specific area, then I'll have Shannon on again, and we can rabbit hole down, some particular vein. Anyway, much love to the followers. Want to thank you for subscribing and following us. If you like our content, we'll keep making it. It's just a lot of work sometimes to do these videos. So, and I've got a lot of things going on. So just, forgive me if it's been a few months, but I hope you like this episode and let me know what you think. God bless.